You ever wake up one morning, step outside, and instantly feel that something isn't right? That was me. It was just after 7 a.m. The air smelled of wet grass, and my coffee was still steaming in my hands. My ranch is usually dead quiet at that hour, except for cattle shifting lazily in the pasture and the birds starting their daily choir. Peaceful, predictable, mine. But that morning, I saw something that didn't belong. At the edge of the public road, not far from my gate, stood a bright yellow arrow sign. It wasn't mine. It looked freshly planted, pointing directly toward my private driveway, like it was inviting strangers in. I frowned, squinting through the steam of my coffee. At first, I thought maybe the county left it there for construction. But no. Written in bold letters across the sign were the words, "Caravan Event. 150 guests." I froze. My ranch? A caravan event? For 150 people? My heart sank into my boots. I walked closer, and that's when I noticed another sign further down the road. Then another. A whole breadcrumb trail of arrows leading straight to my locked gate, as if my home had been transformed overnight into some kind of venue. And then came the first wave of fear. Because just as I'm trying to process this insanity, a car slowed down near the gate. A woman, in business clothes, leaned over her steering wheel, squinting at her phone, then at my property, like she was arriving exactly where she was supposed to be. But this was my ranch, my private land, my peace. And I had a gut feeling something much bigger was about to unfold. The woman in the car rolled down her window and called out, "Excuse me, is this where the realtor caravan is supposed to check in?" I blinked at her, gripping my coffee tighter. "Ma'am, this is a private ranch," I said firmly, "not an event center." She looked at her phone, then back at me, confusion written all over her face. "But my GPS led me right here. The address matches." I stepped closer to her car. On her phone screen was a red pin dropped exactly on my front gate. My chest tightened. Someone had deliberately programmed this location for her event app. Before I could answer, I heard footsteps behind me. My neighbor, Rick, came strolling over from his place, a smirk tugging at his lips. "Jake," he chuckled, "you planning a surprise party without telling me?" "I first am hearing about it." I showed him the sign. Rick raised his eyebrows, then pulled out his phone and started snapping pictures. "Document it," he said. "You're gonna need proof before this circus gets bigger." And, oh, he was right. Because as I scrolled through my own buzzing phone, my stomach dropped. An email had just arrived. The subject line read, "Reservation Confirmation, Ranch Event." I tapped it open, and there it was, a message from none other than Denise Caldwell, the HOA president of the subdivision down the road. The email stated, plain as day, that my ranch had been reserved for a realtor showcase caravan. 150 attendees were scheduled. Time, date, location, all locked in. I almost dropped my coffee. My ranch? Reserved? Without my permission? Rick whistled low, peering over my shoulder. "She's got some nerve," he said. But nerve wasn't the right word. No, this felt deliberate, calculated. I scrolled further and found a map attachment. And sure enough, the geopin location for check-in wasn't their clubhouse or some neutral spot, it was my gate. The realization hit me hard. My quiet ranch had just been turned into ground zero for a 150-person invasion. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. The woman in the first car hadn't moved yet. She leaned halfway out her window, looking almost embarrassed. "So this isn't the place?" I shook my head. "No, ma'am. This is my ranch. Private land. You're not supposed to be here." Her cheeks flushed. "But the email said, and the app shows—" She held up her phone helplessly. Rick chuckled from behind me. "Lady, unless that app knows how to milk cows and fix fences, it's lying to you." I tried not to laugh, but I was too angry to find it funny. Instead, I pointed to my locked gate. "If you can't get through here, that should tell you everything." She nodded quickly, apologized, and drove a little further down the road to park. But she didn't leave. No, she stayed, engine idling, waiting for more directions. And she wasn't alone for long. Within 10 minutes, another 2 cars slowed to a crawl, their drivers peering at their phones, then at my property. They looked the same: business suits, notepads, real estate flyers on the dashboard. One man stepped out looking annoyed. "Excuse me," he called. "Is this the caravan meetup?" Rick laughed outright. "Buddy, unless you're buying cattle, you're in the wrong place." I held up my phone and waved the email at him. "I just got this too," I said. "The HOA sent this to you, didn't they?" He nodded, frowning. "Yes, Denise Caldwell. She said this location was confirmed." I rubbed my forehead. My blood pressure was climbing. "Well, she's wrong. This is private property. Nobody asked me." The man's jaw dropped. "Wait, you mean this isn't official? Does it look official?" I snapped, gesturing at my locked gate. Rick leaned in, his voice low. "Jake, this isn't just confusion. Look around." And I did. The yellow signs weren't homemade. They were printed, professional, staked into the ground like they'd been placed by a crew. The GPS wasn't some random pin drop. This was planned, deliberate, and the realization hit me like a gut punch. This wasn't a mistake. Someone had decided they owned my land without asking. Rick nudged me with his elbow, smirking grimly. "You better refill that coffee, partner. This circus is just getting started." He was right, because at that very moment my phone buzzed again. Another email, another confirmation, another reminder that this storm was about to roll right over my peaceful ranch, and things were about to get much, much worse. By the time the third car pulled up, I knew this wasn't going to be a quiet morning. Realtors were gathering on the shoulder of the road, pacing with their phones in hand, some frustrated, some confused. And me? I was just standing there with my coffee, feeling like my own land had been hijacked without warning. Then came the email that nearly made me spit my drink out. Subject line: Reservation Confirmation, Hollis Ranch. I opened it, and sure enough, the name Denise Caldwell was right at the top. HOA President, self-appointed queen of the subdivision that sat just over my fence line. The email was written as if everything had already been agreed upon. "Your ranch has been reserved for our Realtor Caravan event," it read. "We expect 150 agents tomorrow between 2 and 3 p.m. Trailhead access falls under community provisions." My hand trembled as I read. Reserved? Trailhead access? Community provisions? I barked out a humorless laugh. That woman must have lost her mind. The subdivision rules didn't mean a thing on my ranch. That would be like me walking into her living room and declaring it a public park. Rick leaned over my shoulder, reading along. "She actually wrote that?" he whistled. "Man, she's bold." "No," I snapped. "This is trespassing dressed up in fancy words." Attached to the email was a map. A bright red pin dropped squarely on my gate, labeled Check-in Location. I stared at it, anger boiling in my chest. Someone had programmed this. Someone had intentionally led 150 people right to my doorstep. I dialed Denise's number immediately, my thumb pressing harder than it needed to. She answered on the second ring, her voice chipper like nothing was wrong. "Good morning, Mr. Hollis. I trust you've seen the confirmation?" "Confirmation?" My voice shook. "Denise, you've got 150 people coming to my gate tomorrow. You didn't ask me for anything." There was a pause, then a laugh. "Oh, Jake, no need to get so worked up. The CC and Rs cover community access. It's all standard procedure." I clenched my teeth. "Those rules apply to your subdivision, not my ranch. My land isn't your clubhouse." Her tone sharpened. "Let's not make this difficult. This event is important for property values in the area. You benefit too." Rick muttered a curse under his breath, shaking his head. I lowered my voice, calm but ice cold. "Denise, hear me clearly. You do not have permission. No one steps foot on my property." She laughed again, like I was a stubborn child. "Well, let's just see how it goes tomorrow. The agents are already en route for setup." And with that, she hung up. I stood frozen, phone pressed to my ear, listening to the empty dial tone. My chest tightened. This wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. It was war. After Denise hung up on me, I just stood there, phone still in my hand, staring at the gate like it had suddenly turned into a battlefield. Rick muttered something about lawyers and walked back toward his porch, but I didn't follow. Instead, I sank into the old rocking chair on mine and let the morning air wash over me. This ranch wasn't just dirt and fences. It was my father's legacy. I could still picture him, years ago, hammering posts into the ground with sweat dripping down his back, grinning at me like it was the greatest job in the world. "Son," he told me once, "land is the one thing you protect with everything you've got, because when it's gone forever." I was younger then, didn't fully understand. But now, as I looked out at the fields, I felt the weight of his words. Every fence post, every patch of pasture, every quiet morning with cattle lowing in the distance, it all meant something. It was freedom. It was family. It was mine. And now, some HOA president thought she could waltz in and turn it into her event center? No, not on my watch. I rubbed my temples, heart pounding harder with each thought. This wasn't just about inconvenience. This was about someone trying to strip away the thing I loved most, the thing that grounded me in this noisy, greedy world. And the more I thought about it, the more my hands trembled, not with fear, but with anger. Because if Denise thought she could take over my land without asking, she had no idea who she was dealing with. The morning should have been quiet, but instead, it felt like I was standing in the middle of a parking lot that didn't exist yesterday. One by one, cars started slowing down in front of my ranch. First 3, then 5, then 7. Realtors in suits and dresses stepped out, shielding their eyes against the sun, phones in their hands, all of them looking around with the same puzzled expression. A tall man in a gray blazer walked up to my gate first. He glanced at his phone, then at me. "Excuse me?" he said. "Is this where the caravan check-in is happening?" I clenched my jaw. "No, sir. This is private property. You're in the wrong place." He frowned, holding out his phone like evidence in a courtroom. "But the app says right here, your address, your gate. We were told this is the main stop." Behind him, a woman in high heels waved her phone too. "Yeah, the GPS brought us all here. Is this some kind of prank?" Rick, leaning casually against his fence post, chuckled. "No prank, just a whole bunch of folks following bad directions." I wasn't laughing. My stomach churned as more cars pulled in, engines humming, doors slamming shut. It wasn't just one or two mistakes anymore. It was a growing crowd. A younger realtor walked up, sweating under his tie. "Look, man, we got an email. Says the Hollis Ranch is reserved. HOA handled everything." He gave me a hopeful smile, like I was about to wave them in. I pointed to the heavy chain on my gate. "Does this look like a place that's reserved? Nobody asked me. Nobody has permission." The man's smile faded, replaced with frustration. He looked back at the others. "Well, somebody better explain, because my broker said attendance here was mandatory." The murmurs started then. Realtors gathering in little knots, phones out, calling their offices, reading emails, showing each other the same GPS pin that had been shoved down their throats. Confusion mixed with irritation. And me, I felt the heat rising in my chest. It wasn't just the sun. It was the sheer arrogance of it all. Denise had actually convinced these people that they had a right to be here. Rick nudged me with his elbow. "You need to call the sheriff before this mob grows any bigger." He was right. I pulled out my phone, hands trembling with anger, and dialed the non-emergency number. The dispatcher answered calmly. "Sheriff's Department, what's your situation?" I took a deep breath. "This is Jake Hollis out on County Road 12. I've got unauthorized signs on the road, GPS apps pointing strangers to my private ranch, and about 20 people already here thinking they're attending some event. I did not give permission. I need a deputy out here." The dispatcher's voice grew serious. "Understood, sir. We'll have someone in your area shortly. Stay by your property. Do not engage if the crowd grows hostile." I hung up, my throat dry, because I had the sinking feeling this was about to get a whole lot worse before it got better. By the time the 12th car rolled up, I'd had enough. Realtors were pacing along the road, some arguing into their phones, others muttering that they'd been scammed. The air felt heavy, like a storm was about to break. That's when I heard the crunch of gravel behind me. A white sheriff's SUV rolled slowly up the road, the gold star on the door catching the sunlight. Relief washed over me, but it was tangled with something else, too. Anger, because it shouldn't have come to this. The deputy stepped out, tall and broad-shouldered, sunglasses hiding his eyes. He looked at the crowd, then at me, then at the gate. "Morning. Who's the property owner here?" I raised my hand. "That'd be me, Jake Hollis." He nodded, pulled out a notepad. "All right, Mr. Hollis, tell me what's going on." I gestured toward the signs, the cars, the restless crowd. "Deputy, I've got unauthorized event signs planted all along the road pointing people straight to my ranch. GPS apps are dropping pins right at my gate. And I've got emails from an HOA president claiming she reserved my land for a 150-person realtor event. Nobody asked me. Nobody has permission." The deputy's eyebrows shot up. "Reserved your land?" "Without even talking to me," I said, shoving my phone into his hands. "Here's the email. Look at the map. Look at the pin. This is deliberate." He studied the screen, whistling under his breath. "Well, that's bold and illegal." Behind him, a woman in a navy blazer piped up. "Deputy, this is a misunderstanding. We were told this ranch was part of the community event." The deputy turned, his voice firm. "Ma'am, this is private property. You have no right to enter without the owner's consent. You all need to stay off this land." A ripple of murmurs ran through the crowd. Some looked embarrassed, others looked furious. One man in sunglasses muttered, "Unbelievable. I drove 2 hours for this." The deputy looked back at me. "Mr. Hollis, I'll file an incident report. We'll also contact the county about these unauthorized signs on the public right-of-way. Do you want to press charges if anyone tries to come through that gate?" My throat was dry, but I didn't hesitate. "Yes. Absolutely. If anyone cuts that lock or steps on my property without permission, I want them charged with trespassing." The deputy gave a single nod, writing it down. Understood. Then he raised his voice for the whole group to hear. Everyone, listen up. This ranch is private property. There is no authorized event here. If you enter, you will be trespassing and you could be arrested. Stay on the county road until your organizers give you further instructions. The crowd went quiet. Phones came up, recording every word. The tension shifted, fear replacing confusion. But as I stood there, watching the realtors whisper angrily into their phones, I had the sinking feeling this wasn't the end. This was just the opening act. Because what happened later that afternoon made the morning chaos look small. By early afternoon, the road outside my ranch looked like a badly organized street fair. Cars lined up, bumper to bumper, people standing in the heat with clipboards, some still trying to convince themselves this was the right place. Rick leaned against my fence, arms crossed, shaking his head. "I told you, Jake," he muttered. "This circus is just getting started." And then, like he'd summoned them with those words, a white utility van pulled up. The logo on the side read, "Access Solutions, Locksmith and Security." My gut twisted. A man hopped out, tool bag slung over his shoulder, clipboard in hand. He walked straight toward my gate like he owned it. "Afternoon," he said briskly. "I'm here to open the lock for today's event." I stepped in front of him, my voice sharper than I intended. "The hell you are! Who sent you?" He flipped his clipboard around, showing me a work order. "Community Management Company says I'm supposed to remove this lock and prep for caravan traffic." I scanned the paper. It had HOA letterhead, a signature scribbled at the bottom, but no property owner authorization. My name was nowhere. "This is private property," I snapped, shoving the clipboard back. "You don't touch that lock." The locksmith looked uneasy. "Sir, I was told everything's cleared. I've got my orders." Rick barked out a laugh. "Buddy, unless your orders came from Jake here, you're about 5 minutes away from being in a world of trouble." The locksmith hesitated, glancing at the restless crowd of realtors behind him. Someone shouted from the road, "Just cut it already! We paid for access!" Phones came up again, recording, live streaming. The locksmith shifted nervously, sweat dripping down his temple. I lowered my voice, but made sure it carried. "Listen carefully. You cut that lock, you're committing trespass and property damage on camera. The sheriff already knows what's going on. Are you really willing to risk your license and career for a fake work order?" His hand froze on his tool bag. His eyes flicked to the patrol SUV still parked a little ways down the road. The deputy was watching us closely, hand resting on his belt. The locksmith swallowed hard. Let me call my dispatcher." He stepped back, fumbling for his phone. But the chaos didn't stop there, because while he was on the phone, another truck pulled up, a vendor hauling folding tables and orange cones. A couple of guys jumped out, dragging equipment toward the shoulder like they were setting up a check-in station. The deputy stormed forward then, his voice booming. "Hold it right there! Do you have a county permit for this setup?" The workers froze. One stammered, The HOA told us." "Wrong answer," the deputy barked. "Public right-of-way can't be blocked without authorization. Pack it up, now!" The workers exchanged nervous looks, then started shoving cones back into the truck. Meanwhile, the locksmith hung up his call and shuffled toward me, avoiding my eyes. "My office says without property owner permission, I can't proceed. Sorry for the confusion." He packed his tools and left, his van kicking up dust as it sped away. But the damage was already done. The crowd was restless, angry, and louder now. Voices rose, some demanding answers, others threatening lawsuits. A woman jabbed her phone toward me. "The HOA said this ranch was part of the contract. You can't just back out now." I stepped closer to the gate, raising my voice so everyone could hear. I never signed a contract. You've been lied to. And if anyone sets foot on this property, they'll be arrested. The deputy backed me up, hand on his radio. You heard him. Stay off this land. This isn't a negotiation. But I could see it in their eyes, the disbelief, the frustration, the simmering anger. This wasn't over. Not even close. Just when I thought things couldn't get more ridiculous, Rick came jogging over, his face flushed. Jake, he said, slightly out of breath, they're trying the back road. I felt my stomach drop. The utility easement? He nodded. Yeah, saw a group in suits walking down there with clipboards, like they're on a field trip. I grabbed my truck keys and drove around to the far fence line where the power company headed service road. Sure enough, a handful of people in business clothes were gathered near the locked gate, pointing and talking like it was their grand solution. One woman, holding a clipboard, spotted me pulling up. She smiled politely, as if she wasn't trespassing. Sir, we were told the utility easement provides alternate access to your ranch. We just need to bring a few people through here. I stared at her, dumbfounded. Lady, that easement belongs to the power company. It's for utility trucks only, not for caravans, not for realtor events, and definitely not for you. She tried again, her tone turning syrupy sweet. But it connects to your property, doesn't it? That means it's fair game for community use. Before I could explode, another truck pulled up. Out stepped Mark Bradley, the utility company technician who managed this section of the line. He was a big man with a serious face, and when he saw the group, he sighed like he'd seen this nonsense before. Afternoon, folks, he said, flipping open a folder. This road is strictly for power line maintenance. It's not public, it's not community access, and it sure isn't for events. The clipboard woman frowned. But surely there's some exception. Mark cut her off, pointing to the posted sign at the gate. Authorized utility personnel only. No public access. His tone was firm, final. You step through here, you'll be trespassing on company land. Rick, who'd followed in his pickup, chuckled. Guess you'll have to find another way to crash Jake's property. The group's faces fell. Their backup plan had just been slammed shut by the utility company itself. And Mark wasn't done. He nailed a bright orange notice to the gate. Closed for scheduled maintenance, no access. The road's locked down until further notice, he said flatly. If anyone tries to breach it, we'll treat it as a safety violation. The clipboard woman muttered something under her breath, then led her group back to their cars, their confidence leaking out of them like air from a punctured tire. As they drove away, Mark looked at me and shook his head. Jake, some people think rules are suggestions. Don't let them push you. I thanked him, feeling a little steadier knowing at least the utility company was on my side. But deep down, I knew the biggest fight was still waiting at my front gate. Revook, and sure enough, by late afternoon, the showdown finally came. The crowd was buzzing like a kicked hornet's nest. Realtors were red-faced, some pacing in frustration, others shouting into their phones. The deputy stood firm, one hand resting on his belt, his presence the only thing keeping the chaos from boiling over. And then came the hammer. A silver county sedan pulled up, dust trailing behind it. Out stepped Ellen Carter, the county permits officer. She carried a thick folder under her arm, her expression all business. She walked straight to the deputy. We traced that so-called approval email. It didn't come from the county servers. She opened the folder and pulled out printed pages full of codes and headers. It was generated through the HOA's email system. The signatures don't match. This is forgery, plain and simple. The deputy held the pages up for the crowd to see. You all hear that? These approvals were fake. A collective gasp rippled through the agents. Some cursed under their breath. One man shouted, "You mean we were tricked into coming here?" Another muttered, "Unbelievable. This ruins our credits." Denise's face drained of color. "No, no, that's not—" Ellen cut her off sharply. "And there's more. The so-called easement they were banking on." She pulled out another document, tapping it with her finger. "It's not approved. It's just a proposal, marked under review. No legal access exists through this property." Phones shot higher into the air, live streams buzzing with comments. Realtors huddled together, showing each other the MLS app on their screens. Suddenly, a chorus of alerts chimed from their devices. One woman gasped, "Look, the system just canceled the check-in." All around us, agents stared at their screens in disbelief. The event location had been flagged as invalid, attendance credits wiped out. The whole point of their journey gone in an instant. "Are you kidding me? That was our certification credit. This ruins everything." Another groaned. "This is going to be all over social media." Denise's face drained of color. "No, no, that's not—" Ellen cut her off sharply. "And there's more. The so-called easement they were banking on?" She pulled out another document, tapping it with her finger. "It's not approved. It's just a proposal, marked under review. No legal access exists through this property." The deputy's jaw tightened. "Forgery isn't a misunderstanding, ma'am. It's a crime." The silence that followed was crushing. Realtors turned on her, muttering words like lawsuit, liability, and fraud. Rick leaned against the fence, grinning ear to ear. "Jake, I think the queen just lost her crown." For the first time all day, I felt the tension in my chest loosen. The truth was out, the forgery exposed, the MLS system itself had slammed the final nail in her coffin. But the fallout, that was only beginning. And as the sun began to set, the HOA tried one last desperate move. The sun was sinking low, painting the sky in streaks of gold and fire. The crowd of realtors had thinned, but not before leaving Denise Caldwell standing red-faced in front of my gate, surrounded by the wreckage of her own arrogance. The deputy finished his paperwork and turned to her. "Ma'am, citations will be issued for the unpermitted encroachment on county property, and this forgery will be included in my report. You might want to contact a lawyer." Denise tried to speak, but her voice was drowned out by the sound of car doors slamming as the last few agents stormed off, muttering curses and threats of lawsuits. Ellen Carter tucked her folder under her arm and gave me a nod. "Mr. Hollis, you handled this the right way. Keep every bit of documentation. If this ever lands in court, you'll be glad you did." Rick couldn't resist. He leaned on the gate, grinning at Denise. "Looks like your little empire just crumbled, ma'am. Maybe next time you'll knock before you try to take over somebody's land." Denise blared at him, then at me, but said nothing. For once, she had no words. Later that evening, as the deputy's SUV pulled away and the road finally cleared, the ranch fell quiet again. The cattle shifted lazily in the pasture. A cool breeze carried the scent of grass through the air. Peace, sweet, hard-earned peace, settled back over my land. I sat on the porch, coffee cup in hand, staring at the gate that had been at the center of the storm. The sign still hung there. No event without owner permission. Simple words, but powerful. Rick couldn't resist. He leaned on the gate, grinning at Denise. "Looks like your little empire just crumbled, ma'am. Maybe next time you'll knock before you try to take over somebody's land." Denise glared at him, then at me, but said nothing. For once, she had no words. Later that evening, as the deputy's SUV pulled away and the road finally cleared, the ranch fell quiet again. The cattle shifted lazily in the pasture. A cool breeze carried the scent of grass through the air. Peace, sweet, hard-earned peace, settled back over my land. I sat on the porch, coffee cup in hand, staring at the gate that had been at the center of the storm. The sign still hung there, "No event without owner permission." Simple words, but powerful. Rick wandered over, hands in his pockets. "Well, partner, that was one hell of a day. You planning to frame that sign?" I chuckled softly. "Might as well. It saved my ranch." He sat beside me, his expression thoughtful. "You know, Jake, sometimes saying no is the most powerful thing you can do." I nodded, letting the words sink in, because he was right. This wasn't just about keeping people off my land. It was about standing up when someone tries to steamroll you, about drawing a line and refusing to let anyone cross it. The next morning, I found an envelope in my mailbox, certified mail from the HOA board. Inside was a stiffly worded apology, signed by every board member except Denise. They admitted they'd overstepped. They promised to correct procedures, suspend Denise from event planning, and issue a public apology at the next HOA meeting. It felt hollow, but it was something. That same day, I got an email from a completely different real estate company. This one was professional, respectful. They asked if my ranch was available for a future event, attached with a formal proposal, a deposit, and most importantly, an insurance certificate that actually listed me as additional insured. I couldn't help but laugh. "Now that's how you ask permission," I muttered. That night, as the stars came out and silence wrapped around the ranch, I thought back to my father's words. Land is the one thing you protect with everything you've got. He was right, and today I'd done just that. The click of the gate lock echoed in the dark, not just the sound of metal on metal, but the sound of closure. This wasn't just about an HOA gone wild. It was about boundaries, respect, and the reminder that sometimes the loudest defense you can make is a simple, unshakable no. And maybe, just maybe, that's the lesson everyone needed to learn.